We spoke a little bit about food for the soul in the earlier session. Now we're going to talk about food for the body. And it is arguably the single biggest place where we can make a major impact, where people unwittingly are sabotaging their well-being. And I can't think of no better individual to start this series of discussions off with than William Lee. Bill's good friend. He's been on the show numerous times, has done a fantastic job articulating, popularizing, and translating cutting-edge ideas that dramatically influence how our bodies can deal with ailments. We can prevent those illnesses from getting worse, and most importantly, how food can play a role there. So take it away, Dr. Lee.
Well, thank you, Mehmet. I'd like to thank the Pontifical Council for Culture, Robin Smith, the STEM for Life and Cure Foundation, and the STOQ Foundation for organizing such a splendid and special event and inviting me to speak. Cardinal Ravasi, Monsignor Trafni, distinguished guests and colleagues. Being here before this gathering of world leaders, I'd like to submit that the time has come for us in medical research to accept the need for humility. For the past 100 years, bold medical research has enabled us to significantly extend human longevity, especially in developing countries. Biopharmaceuticals, medical devices, and diagnostic technologies have really transformed the way that we approach modern medicine. And with even more advances on the horizon, conquering diseases like cancer seem ever more realizable than ever before. Yet, humility is warranted because when it comes to health itself, we have relatively little knowledge, especially compared to our knowledge of disease. For example, we know that many cancers are started by mutations in our DNA. There are 60,000 natural errors in our DNA that occur as our cells divide every day. But why don't we get cancer more often? We know that microbes cause disease, and more recently that our microbiome is important for our health. There are 37 trillion bacteria in our bodies, so we're infected, but not sick. Why? We also know that aging weakens our defense systems, and yet somebody who is 80 or even 90 years old has an immune system that's capable of eradicating metastatic cancer. How can that be? Clearly, there are unexplored dimensions and major questions that need to be addressed so that we can better understand how our body normally resists disease. And there's another frontier to be explored, and that's how our diet and our environments impact on our health. Because healthy diets foster healthy bodies, which then foster healthy communities. But how does food actually influence our cells to foster health beyond the traditional principles of nutrition? And that's what my organization, the Angiogenesis Foundation, has been working on for the past decade. We've been cataloging and analyzing natural bioactive chemicals that are found in plant-based and other foods. We've been studying how these bioactives act on human cells, and we've been correlating this with health outcomes from an epidemiological perspective. And one of the world's leaders in nutritional epidemiology, Dr. Walter Willett, is going to follow on the panel. And we've also been studying the impact of different plant varietals, cooking methods, the impact of food storage, and even the impact of combining foods and what that does on the body. One of our goals is to elucidate how foods that are common in our world cultures influence our innate health defense systems. Let me explain what I mean by that. We're beginning to understand how foods influence angiogenesis. That's the process that our bodies use to grow blood vessels. And it's what we can use to either starve a cancer or feed a heart. We're learning how food influences stem cells, which actually help our organs maintain themselves and actually regenerate as we age. And how our food interacts with our immune system, our DNA repair system, and our microbiome, which influences not only our digestive health, but our immune system as well, and even our brain function, our social behavior. These innate defense systems for health are interconnected biologically, and they are tied to our diet. So understanding how diet impacts these health defense systems will help us achieve better health outcomes. But this is a bigger challenge than most have acknowledged because there are large gaps in our knowledge about what constitutes health. The truth is that we know very little about how our health is maintained over the course of our lives. It's essentially an uncharted jungle with paths that we know exist, but that have not been fully mapped. We know quite a lot about the edges of this jungle, but we've barely ventured into its interior. Exploring our health is no different than exploring the depths of the ocean, where we're constantly discovering amazing new species every year, or exploring the outer reaches of the universe, where we're discovering new planets every year. And like every major exploration, our investigation has to begin from a point of humility and wonderment, because we have a lot to learn. And for this reason, I'm actually making a proposal today, and that's that as we as a community should mount the first human expedition of the 21st century. Let's call it a health expedition. And like the expeditions of the past with Shackleton, Agassiz, and Livingston, we'll explore an undiscovered country. But our exploration is not aimed at the great outdoors, but rather at the wilderness inside our bodies. The health expedition that we are proposing at the Angiogenesis Foundation will be the first ever global collaboration exploring how our body's innate defense systems work together and interact with our environments to foster health. We'll unite experts spanning diverse fields from immunology to microbiology to vascular biology and others. Rather than work in silos, let's work together so we can pool our knowledge and find out how health works at the cellular level. We are actively engaging biologists and clinicians and nutritional epidemiologists to tie together, finally, our diet, our cells, our organs, and our environment. And we're going to take a systems-based approach to develop a roadmap for research that will allow us to more deeply understand how we stay healthy from the time life begins to when it ends. And this is going to allow us to translate our scientific findings to everyday applications to help us meet our community's needs. Imagine a future in which we can identify the exact foods and their doses and their preparations on an individual level that can help us prevent specific illnesses, in which we can have personal devices in our homes or on our bodies to measure our health biomarkers and alert us before we develop a disease so we can protect our own well-being and that of our families. And imagine a future in which we have new collaborations between our national research institutions, our agricultural organizations, our universities, and industrial leaders so that we can accelerate our knowledge of health and diet for the good of society. Let me just share with you an example of how the power of what can be achieved with this approach. Here's a study of 47,000 men. It's called the Health Professionals Follow-Up Study, in which it was found that men who consume 2 to 3 servings of tomato sauce per week have a 33% reduced risk of developing prostate cancer. This is a remarkable association. And in the study, many men did not develop prostate cancer. But for those who did, it was found that those who ate more tomato sauce had less aggressive prostate cancer because there were fewer blood vessels, as counted under the microscope, for feeding those cancers. Tumors require blood vessels to grow, and lycopene, which is a natural chemical found in tomatoes, suppresses this process. This is an example of dietary anti-angiogenesis at the human pathological, molecular, and population health levels. Now, why tomato sauce? It's been shown that cooking tomatoes increases the amount of lycopene, which is found in the tomato, and converts it into a chemical form that the body can absorb better. In fact, lycopene increases by 50% after just cooking for 2 minutes, and by 250% after a half an hour of simmering. And here's the impact of food combinations. We know that lycopene is absorbed in our bloodstream when tomatoes are cooked in water. But when tomatoes are cooked in olive oil, the body can absorb 3 times the amount of lycopene because lycopene is fat soluble and can be more easily absorbed into our bloodstream when it's mixed with oil. And we've even looked at what types of olive oils contain the highest numbers of polyphenols. And we've identified 3 varietals that contain the highest levels. This is the Moriolo from Umbria here in Italy, Picual in Spain, and Kornecki, an olive from Greece. We've also studied tea and found anti-angiogenic cancer suppressing activities in Chinese jasmine tea, Japanese sencha, and British Earl Grey. So this is an international survey of teas that are consumed across cultures. And what was surprising to us is that the teas have different potencies, but the thing is that when you mix the two weakest teas to create the most potent tea, it suggested that there are food synergies. And these are the types of beginning, mind-opening experiments and results that demonstrate the promise of exploring and probing our diet and our health. And I believe it's imperative to expand our knowledge using the tools of biotechnology and cell biology to explore these types of phenomena. Now, I need help from all of you on this because in this very room, we can begin to pool the critical resources for a health expedition. By expanding our focus from disease to health and from pharmaceuticals to farm, we'll become better stewards of our soil and our water. We'll learn how to better treat our plants and animals so we can make our world a more sustainable place for the generations to come. With a deeper biological understanding of health itself and our defenses and the impact of food, we'll also be able to make health more accessible to the poorest places on the planet, where advanced medicines may not be readily available, but where food is consumed every day. We're setting out to unite the stakeholders, and we need supporters, researchers, healthcare professionals, philanthropists, and technology partners. No matter what our professional backgrounds or our nationalities, we all have a stake in this. Let me close by presenting a case that illustrates why we need to know more about our health defense systems. As a physician, I am caring for an 83-year-old woman who has endometrial cancer. That's a deadly cancer of the uterus. She initially had surgery to remove the cancer, and because of her age, 83, she declined chemotherapy. Within 12 months, her cancer returned aggressively and spread throughout her abdomen. Her prognosis was bleak, and she seemed incurable. Instead of using the playbook of chemotherapy to destroy the disease, I worked with her medical team to shift the focus of her care towards boosting her innate health defense systems. Using available scientific evidence, we changed her diet to include foods with anti-angiogenic activities. We enhanced her microbiome using targeted probiotics. And we gave her a treatment that enabled her own immune system to find and eliminate the cancer. Within 9 weeks, her cancer was no longer detectable by physical exam, blood test, or PET or CT scan. What's remarkable to me is that an 83-year-old individual's immune system is capable of wiping out cancer when it's given a chance. By shifting our focus away from killing her disease towards enabling her own health defenses, she was able to maintain her quality of life, and to this day, she remains cancer-free. This patient is my mother. I'm committed to helping more people leverage their body's health defense systems to maintain their full health potential, because reaching our health potential allows us to reach our human potential. I believe our expedition in health is timely and necessary in order to bring the new science of health and healing to benefit humanity. We're all gathered here united to cure, and it's our duty to do all we can to advance our common goals of health. Thank you.
That's a wonderful story with your mom. Many years before you gained the wisdom to be able to help her, you had a turning point in your life that opened you more to this idea that food could have the more targeted impact that you described today. What was that?
Before I went to medical school, I took a gap year and I traveled around the world learning how other cultures stay healthy. And it was a much more comprehensive view, more holistic view towards health than we have often in American medicine. And so I went to medical school always thinking that the tools of modern scientific research could one day be applied to food, and that moment is now. We're beginning to see the fruits of that effort.
With angiogenesis, you articulate a common denominator concept, right? If there are a dozen pathways to cancer or treating it or reversing it, just being simplistic about it, that's one of them. And if you know all 12, then you can sort of get to the nitty-gritty of it. And we have oncologists here and specialists in the area can articulate this more elegantly than I can, but I think that's at a high level true. What is the common denominator with food? Are there going to be 12 basic types of chemicals in foods that help us? You mentioned lycopene, but it works better with olive oil or fat, and then specifically olive oil and the specific kinds of olive oil. So how accessible will this be for the average person?
Yeah, so we're turning it around by saying it's not about the food, it's about what's in our bodies. It's how we're actually hardwired for health. And if we understand that we need balance, we need circulatory balance, immune balance, we need our DNA to be protected, we need our microbiome to be balanced, what's really interesting, and even our stem cells, this is a cellular conference as well, what we now know is that many of the molecules within food can impact on those balancing systems. So if we think about our bodies and not just what's in the marketplace, I think we'll have a better starting point so we don't get confused by this myriad of choices. We need to start with basics, particularly in a group like this where we're actually looking at the science of health and healing.
So give me your vision in your last minute of what this is going to look like in 5 years. Are we going to have specific diets that are mandatorily offered for certain types of tumors or cardiac ailments or Alzheimer's? There's an Alzheimer's diet now that has become pretty popular, which is sort of a calorie restriction, 12 on, 12 off diet, a ketogenic diet.
Right.
But I don't know if that's going to work. It seems to work anecdotally. Is that how specific we're going to be?
Well, I think that we're at the beginning of a long exploration, this health expedition, to figure out the inner workings of our body. And it's premature to jump to the quick conclusion, which we would like to have, that there's single diets that can solve big problems. I think the most important thing that we've alluded to in the earlier sessions this morning is that from the time we're born and from children to healthy aging, it's a continuum of how our body actually works hard and fires on all cylinders to try to remain healthy. And so what we need to do, my vision is that as we proceed along this health expedition, we will learn that the relationship that we have with food and the relationship where our bodies have with our food is based on very fundamental biological principles, not so different than the way that we think about how medicines actually work today. So if you go back to the principle of food as medicine, we may be returning back to ancient wisdom.
Do you think these next panelists are going to agree with you?
Well, I hope that they will be shedding some additional light into the questions that are at hand.
We're going to find out because they're a hot panel. Billy, thank you very much. William Lee.